He's been called one of the unsung heroes of modern times. Fazle Abed was more than just a mild-mannered accountant. As a young man in the early 1970s, he had a corporate multinational job in finance. He could have stayed on that career path and led a very comfortable life. Instead, in 1972, confronted with war and natural disaster in his homeland, he quit his job and founded BRAC, originally the Bangladesh Rehabilitation Assistance Committee.
People died because they were poor, and I thought that the kind of life I was leading at that time, working for Shell Oil, I thought that this life is not really something that I'd like to pursue. I'd like to pursue something else.
In the decades to come, BRAC would become massive, reaching 100 million people in Asia and Africa. It is known as one of the world's most effective anti-poverty efforts. Abed avoided the limelight. He preferred to let his work speak for itself. Microfinance, community healthcare, education, humanitarian aid, and more. What links these diverse programs together is Abed's lifelong conviction that hope itself can help people overcome poverty. He saw that poverty was not just a lack of money or skills. People remained trapped in poverty, in part because they thought things could never change. They thought it was their fate to be poor. So Abed started by changing this mindset. He gathered people in small groups to talk about their problems so that together they could confront the injustices that held them back. They began to understand that a better world was possible, and that they themselves had the power to build it. This is the power of hope. Millions of people planning for the future, saving and investing. Girls filling up classrooms, women starting their own businesses. BRAC is known for its entrepreneurial approach to tackling poverty. It is known for being efficient and effective, but it is far more than that. The legacy of Fazle Abed is the triumph of hope over fate.
Even life is for a short period on Earth, and I would like that short period that each of us have to be as happy and as productive and as meaningful as possible.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you at Des Moines today to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart: how to end extreme poverty for good. The 3 C's central to the theme of this year's dialogue, COVID, conflict, and climate, loom over every discussion, but more importantly, over the futures of hundreds of millions of people. For several decades, we made steady progress on reducing not only the percentage of people living in extreme poverty, but the actual absolute numbers of people living in extreme poverty. In the last few years, however, the pandemic, followed by a global spike in energy and food prices caused by the war, and the catastrophic impacts of climate change have caused the numbers of people in extreme poverty to go up dramatically. The World Bank has already stated that the 2030 goal of ending extreme poverty will not be achieved. Halfway through the SDGs, this is a bleak conclusion, and one whose reality is the continued suffering of hundreds of millions of families struggling to feed themselves. We are in the throes of a global crisis, the likes of which most of us have not seen in our lifetimes. And sadly, whether it's COVID, conflict, or climate, it is always the poorest of the poor who are the hardest hit. However, this is not the time to feel helpless or to give up hope. While things may be beyond our control, there are many things that we know and have learned through years of hard work on these complex issues that can be applied and scaled to ensure that we get back on track in our pursuit of poverty's end. let me briefly tell you a bit of BRAC's story. When my father, Sir Fazle Abed, founded BRAC in the early 70s, the newly independent Bangladesh had just emerged from a bloody war of independence, following the deadliest tropical cyclone ever recorded. Even in the midst of the economic devastation wrought by war and disaster, working with the poorest of the poor, my father realized that poverty was more than a lack of income and assets. It was also a lack of hope. People ground down by generations of despair and struggle felt their condition was immutable. If poverty reduction programs were to succeed, they would not only need to provide the services, resources, and opportunities that people had been denied for so long, but also build self-esteem and confidence in a better future. People living in poverty would need to be the subjects and not the objects of development programs. And the role of development organizations like BRAC, my father realized, would have to be to empower people so that they can go from passive recipients of aid to active participants in their own development. Over the last 50 years at BRAC, we have seen this proven time and again. To eradicate poverty, we need to kindle people's belief in the possibility of change, even as we create the enabling conditions for that change to happen through the better services, resources, and opportunities we can provide. In 2015, my father had the distinct honor of delivering the laureate address at this event. In his speech, he described how BRAC had continuously evolved in response to the complex, intersectional, and shifting challenges faced by the poor. From an initial focus on consciousness raising to expanding women's access to finance, then training women in different skills and trades, creating markets to sustain those livelihoods, and developing infrastructure and value chains to grow these markets, BRAC was continuously trying and testing different interventions with community members and linking multiple solutions together to strengthen entire ecosystems. He spoke of how simple questions, like where does a woman who had bought a cow in a remote village sell her milk, triggered the transformation of an entire dairy industry through the patient, painstaking work of figuring out how to increase production, set up transformation, train paravets, working through the challenges of each subsequent phase till a comprehensive solution emerged. These experiences and lessons have only become more relevant over time. As we think about how to help people pull themselves out of poverty sustainably, we must think about multifaceted interventions that support both the social and the economic empowerment of the individual and the community. Nothing demonstrates this more than our pioneering work on the segment we call the ultra-poor, the poorest of the poor. We designed the graduation approach to break the poverty trap for those in the harshest forms of poverty with a boost of multiple sequenced interventions. These interventions empower people to become self-reliant and resilient, connecting them to social protection to meet their basic needs, providing training and assets for income generation, financial literacy and saving support, and promoting social empowerment through community engagement and life skills training, all facilitated through in-person coaching. Each of these elements is key to the success of the others, but the real magic is the hope and sense of possibility these women develop through the close mentorship they receive. Ultra-poor graduation programs build the adaptive capacity of those living in extreme poverty and has been proven to work across diverse contexts and populations. Currently, there are over 100 such programs in more than 50 countries. Rigorous long-term research carried out on these programs have shown consistent and compelling impact. The vast majority of participants not only sustain progress, but continue to make further progress after they graduate from these programs because of the resilience and confidence they attain. In the age of conflict, COVID, and climate, our response needs to be bigger and bolder than ever before. However, they need not always be new or different from the hard-won lessons of the past. There are evidence-based solutions that exist that can work even as new challenges emerge, because they rely on the one thing that is universal, that when the right conditions are created, even the poorest of the poor can transform their lives. Throughout my father's life, he was relentless in the pursuit of scale. If there is one quote that is attributed to him more than any other, it is this one: "Small is beautiful, but large is necessary." In the final years of his life, he would sometimes get frustrated by the idea or the suggestion that everything had to be new and innovative. If we're always innovating and piloting, he would ask, then who is scaling the programs and interventions that we already know work? My father passed away in 2019, but his idea of working closely with people and communities to find simple, sustainable, and scalable solutions that instill hope and self-worth while providing the resources and opportunities that people need to transform their lives inspire our work every day. His story is beautifully captured in a new book appropriately titled Hope Over Fate, written by my friend and colleague Scott McMillan, who is here with us today. If you're interested, you will find both Scott and a few copies of the book in the exhibition hall downstairs. Ladies and gentlemen, the end of poverty is an ambitious goal. To many, talking about it at a time like this might even sound foolhardy. Just as millions of people still believe that it is their fate to be poor, that their poverty is somehow ordained by a higher power, many of us feel that the challenges we face are too big and too big or too many. The headwinds are too strong. If you take away one thing from all that I have said here today, let it be this: we have the resources, the evidence, and the know-how to end extreme poverty for good. What we need to do is mobilize the political will that is necessary to scale impactful, evidence-based interventions that we know work. While we will miss the 2030 deadline, we must ensure that we are the last generation on Earth that still has people living in such dehumanizing forms of poverty and deprivation. Those still in such harsh forms of poverty deserve nothing less of us. Thank you very much.